Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to get our evening started. We want to be very respectful of your time tonight. We so appreciate all of you joining us for this great evening, the Common Good Awards, but also this year is very unique for Envision Utah in that we are celebrating our 25th anniversary at Envision Utah. So thank you again for taking time. We know that this is a very busy time of year, and we appreciate you being here. I'm Doug Wright, and it's a real honor to MC this event tonight. And I don't know about you, but this is my first time in this beautiful hotel. How many of you, is this the first time for you as well? Yeah, quite a few people. I know there have been several events here, even political gatherings and so on. But I'll tell you, this is very, very impressive. Of course, we're working on getting something just like this down in Eureka, and it's just a matter of time. Cameron Deal's going to help us pull that off. So thank you again. And a big thank you for two honorary chairmen who are with us tonight. And what an honor it is to have the governor of the great state of Utah, Spencer Cox, with us, and also Spencer F. Eccles. Thank you for the applause for them. I so appreciate what Governor Cox is doing for our state right now and the fact that he would share this very busy evening with us. And I'll tell you, over the years, I've had the honor of knowing Spencer F. Eccles. And we had a chance to work together a bit on the Spike 150 celebration just a few years back. And he is absolutely amazing, and the Eccles family. So, Mr. Eccles, thank you for being here. We want to thank some of our sponsors. Of course, great events like this, great organizations like this. Thank heaven for our sponsors. And for the great reception that we have today, we want to thank our sponsor of the reception, Flagship. So thank you to them. And then we have three headlining sponsors this evening. And without these three, this evening would be considerably different. It would have been hard to pull it off, especially in this way. And the Larry H. Miller Real Estate Group, Rocky Mountain Power, the Woodbury Corporation. Can you join me in thanking them for their participation? And then I'd quickly like to thank some of our other sponsors. Our gold sponsors tonight, Rio Tinto and Robert and Linda Groh, thank you. Our silver sponsors tonight, we'll save our applause for the whole group here. Our silver sponsors, AARP, Cowboy Partners, Intermountain Healthcare, I can tell where the little enclaves are here, and the Nature Conservancy, our bronze sponsors, Ancestry, Clyde Companies, Gardner, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, Curtin McConkie, and Utah Association of Realtors. And once again, please, one more little round of applause for all these great folks. Envision Utah is such a unique organization. I can remember on radio at KSL 20 plus years ago, that's when I first became aware of Envision Utah and a little bit about them. And I've just been so impressed. I remember some of the early predictions of where we would be back 25 years ago, in 20 or 25 years from then. And I look at the growth and I look at what was anticipated, envisioned by Envision Utah, and it is amazing. It's uncanny, the things that have happened that mirror what Envision Utah envisioned for the state. It's a very unique organization, and we have no products to sell. We can't promise that every dollar spent will feed so many people. We're a little unusual when it comes to a nonprofit organization, but we can promise that your donations will go directly toward making this great state of ours a better place, a beautiful place, a prosperous place, and a place that as we grow with a purpose, we grow with a vision, and we continue to be neighborly, a place that we look forward. I was talking with someone here just a moment ago, a place where our grandkids will be proud to live and pleased to live, and they'll look back at their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and say, thank heaven they looked ahead and saw how this state ought to be. And you'll see tonight that Envision Utah isn't just an organization, it's a collective, bringing together so many parts of our society and our culture and our business and those who are here tonight. We all want to leave Utah a better place. And this is actually in the script. I've mentioned I'm moving on. There's a new chairman of Envision Utah coming on board, Ty, and but I said, you know, a great mantle of responsibility falls on Ty's shoulders, that in every board meeting he has to make sure that Eureka gets mentioned somewhere, and Jason actually put it in the script here. I appreciate that. But whether you are from Sanpete County, as Governor Cox, whether or not you're from Iron County, as Governor Levitt, and Governor Gary Herbert just joined us as well. Maybe you're from Utah County, and wherever you're from here in this great state, we want not just the Wasatch Front, not just the Wasatch Back, we want every part of Utah to grow and to become what it can be. And this partnership is something very important, and this partnership and what Envision Utah does and can do is greatly dependent upon your donations. And we'd like to invite you to donate as you can, as you feel so inclined tonight. Just a quick word about the rest of the evening's program. Since this is our 25th anniversary, we want to spend some time celebrating the men and women who helped create Envision Utah, and they've made our work very effective. And then the centerpiece of our event tonight will be the Common Good Awards, and that's a big thing. So many people do so many things for the common good here in the state of Utah, often at great sacrifice and with great focus, and we so appreciate them. We're thrilled to take a few minutes to recognize and celebrate the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, so we'll be talking more about and with them. Finally, it wouldn't be a true Envision Utah event if we didn't spend at least a little time thinking about our future. Well, that's what it's all about, learning from the past, learning from what's happening right now, and envisioning what our future should be. And we are joined by a nationally renowned expert on housing, and Dr. Jenny Schuetz will be speaking to us and presenting some potential solutions and thoughts on what really is kind of a housing crisis here in the state of Utah. Boy, talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids. I know I've talked with the Speaker of the House often about that, Brad Wilson, and he's talked about his own kids. It's hitting very, very close to home in the state of Utah. So thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for supporting the vision of Envision Utah, being concerned about our past, our present, and our future. And it's a real honor for me now to turn the time over to Ari Bruening, Envision Utah's president and CEO, for some opening remarks. Ari.
Thank you, Doug. Doug has done a fabulous job volunteering his time as our chair for the last 3 years, and his talents and contributions go far beyond the wonderful voice that we get to hear at every board meeting. But everybody give him a big round of applause. He's stepping down from that post at the end of the year. And next year, Ty McCutcheon will be our new chair, who led Daybreak Communities for many years. I want to thank our sponsors again, and also all of our many funders over the last 25 years, including especially the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation, who's been with us the entire time. And thank you also to everyone who bought a table to this event. Your funding and your participation in our efforts, they matter. You're making history, just like those who started the Envision Utah idea 25 years ago. And I want to also thank our amazing staff at Envision Utah. we are a small team. We're 12 people. But those 12 people are able to accomplish amazing things, far more than what you might expect from just a dozen people. And a lot of them have worked tirelessly to make this event possible, and they deserve a round of applause as well. Now, Utah is a great place. Every time we ask Utahns what they love most about this place, we hear three things. And these three things show up in our mission statement. Utahns want Utah to continue to be beautiful, prosperous, and neighborly. Beautiful captures Utahns' love for our stunning outdoors and our amazing recreation opportunities. Prosperous sums up our strong economy with good jobs and historically an affordable cost of living. Neighborly relates to a host of attributes about the people here. Whether you talk about family-friendly communities, the Utah way, the good and friendly people, the sense of community, the small town feel, the safe communities, or the way we welcome outsiders. Neighborly includes all of that. And those three attributes, beautiful, prosperous, and neighborly, are what make Utah such an attractive place that we grow. Our kids stay here. They also tend to come back here after leaving for a few years, and others come to join us. My family has been part of that growth over the years. So my first ancestors to arrive in Utah were John and Adelia Lambert, who came in 1850 after they were forced out of Nauvoo, Illinois. Then more ancestors came from England and Denmark. Then in the early 1900s, the Bruenings came from Germany, and more ancestors came from Texas. But my family didn't stop causing growth in the early 1900s. Then we had children. I'm the youngest of 7. I've got 4 children of my own. I suspect many of us have similar family stories, whether your family was here in 1846 already, whether your ancestors came in the late 1800s, or whether you moved here recently. The story of Utah's growth is your story. Now, the irony is that the very fact that Utah is beautiful, prosperous, and neighborly causes our growth, but then that growth threatens how beautiful, prosperous, and neighborly we can be. So all we need to do to stop the growth is to become less beautiful, prosperous, and neighborly. But I don't think any of us want that. So how do we deal with this paradox? That was a question that was faced by some modern pioneers in the 1980s and 1990s. By the mid-90s, Utah was growing rapidly, and people were worried about traffic congestion, air quality, water, and housing costs. Envision Utah was born when pioneers came together to address those issues. In fact, we've got a few clips of those origins.
We recognize an increasing public apathy, and that's why we're down here, to see if we can do something about supplying some visions about where we will go if we don't do anything, and where we want to go, and can we do something about it.
Getting prepared for the future is the focus of a new Utah partnership. Members of the Coalition for Utah's Future met together today to introduce their campaign.
Planning for Utah's future growth is the aim of a new coalition of business and government leaders.
A new coalition of business and government leaders is focusing on Utah's growth as well.
They call themselves Utah Quality Growth Public-Private Partnership. That may be the world's most forgettable name.
I think that if we take a look at the options, that of doing nothing, sitting on our hands and letting growth just go its own way, seek its own level, so to speak, that sometime in the future, not very far out perhaps, probably as soon as 5 or 10 years, certainly in 20 years and beyond, we'd look back and say, why didn't we try?
The coalition wants the government, businesses, and community to work together, so they'll be sending out surveys to ask the public what issues concern you.
Are they going to make any difference? Time will tell.
It's still too early. Okay. Thanks, Rod.
Thanks, Rod.
Well, Rod Decker, I am pleased to report it did make a difference. We built. So in the last 25 years, we built 130 miles of passenger rail. We cut our emissions in half. We cut our per capita water use by 30%. We developed homes and businesses to accommodate the projected growth, on half the land that was projected. Imagine what Utah would be like if we didn't do those things. What if we kept building mostly only single-family homes for the last quarter century? Think about how much land and water we'd be using. Think about what commutes would look like, and think about how hard it would be for some families to afford a home. What if we didn't have rail that carried a lane and a half of rush hour traffic down I-15 every morning and evening? What if each person consumed 50% more water than we do today? Those changes didn't happen because Envision Utah forced them to happen. We have no regulatory power. Our power is in the power of convening and the power of good ideas. When the right people come together to undertake an honest exploration of the future, learn together, and listen to the public's values, they then go forth to implement. This happens because people like you show up, participate in conversations and meetings, take and share surveys, and provide funding for the effort. Now, Envision Utah was officially born in 1997. That's the same year I graduated from high school. Let's just say that when I graduated from high school, I wasn't thinking about how Utah was growing or how to keep it a great place for the next 25 years, but I am extremely grateful that others were thinking about those things. So if you were involved in the founding of Envision Utah 25 years ago, I'm going to ask you to stand up. Come on. I know there are a lot of you. Governor Herbert, that's you. All right, now stay standing, stay standing. Okay, now if you've ever been part of the Envision Utah board or staff, please stand up. Okay. Now, I want to note that in our history, we've had 4 executive directors or CEOs, and all 4 of us are here tonight. Now keep standing up. I see people trying to sit down. Now, if you've ever participated in a committee or a task force on one of our projects, please stand up. Now, there got to be more of you. Okay. Now, if you've ever taken one of our surveys, please stand up. Okay, if you're still sitting down, get out your phone and go to guidingourgrowth.utah.gov and take the survey. All right, now you can sit down. All right, thank you to all of you for being here tonight to celebrate with us. So we're here tonight to celebrate those who dedicated their time for the last 25 years. We're here to celebrate those who've partnered with us for the last 25 years. We're here to celebrate our Common Good awardee that's doing great things for the common good. And then, as always, we're looking to the future to consider one of our most challenging issues, which is housing. Now, I'm going to sit down for a minute, and I'm going to invite you to watch with us a video that we've put together commemorating our 25th anniversary and those who made Envision Utah what it is. And I've got to thank our 3 video sponsors who made this video possible. We're very grateful to Chevron, Dominion Energy, and Jacobson Construction who sponsored this video. After the video, our 2 Envision Utah vice presidents, Jason Brown and Ryan Beck, will come to the podium, and we're going to recognize some of our Utah visionaries and visionary partners. So, thank you. We've been around 25 years, and we can now look back and see some of the great things that have happened.
Utah is a great place to live today, but we didn't get here by accident.
It's helpful for Utahns to think back and remember what the 1980s were like. We had 7 consecutive years of net outmigration.
What in the 80s was a major problem of economic decline in the 1990s then became a problem of dramatic growth in the state.
We want to grow faster and have jobs and homes and livings for everybody. But on the other side of the coin, we don't want to have more traffic and poorer air.
We were seeing open space that began to disappear. Water was beginning to become short.
We did not know how to grow well, but the economy was just churning and producing jobs.
Growth became our constant companion.
We got to find a balance going forward.
There's a time in the life of every problem. When it's big enough, you can see it, and small enough, you can still do something about it.
Political leaders and business leaders and other people concerned about the future all were trying to do something separately and found that they could not create momentum sufficient to bring change.
What was required was a convener, someone who could begin to not only coordinate, but focus how we would proceed so that we weren't simply this effort going this way and another effort going, we were coordinated as a community.
They started Envision Utah as an effort to look at the growth that was coming, consider the options for the future, and engage everyone in the state in planning for and preparing for the future.
What made Envision Utah, I think, unique was its stand-aloneness, if I can use that word that's not a word, that put Envision Utah in a position of being, and yeah, it's a bit cliched term, right, but being the honest broker.
The goals at the outset were to create a generation of planners in Utah, a generation of people who were committed to the idea that we had to think proactively and think long-term to be able to shape the future of the state the way we want it.
I think it was just apparent to everybody that if you think about it, there's a pretty good chance you'll do it better than if you don't. If you just stand by and watch, you've no one to blame but yourself for what happens.
The other goal was to make sure that everyone across Utah, not just elected officials or not just state leaders, but everyone was involved in creating the future.
I had seen a tool in the steel industry about understanding the values of communities. It was called Values and Strategy Assessment. We used it to understand what Utahns really wanted in their future. We were the first region to really use a sophisticated tool to understand what Utahns really had in their hearts as their desires for the future.
It's easy to ask the public, what would you like your community to look like in the future? It's hard for them to visualize, well, this is what we have today, what else could it look like? But if you can hone in on these values, the things that we care about in our communities, the things that we want to retain, that gives us a lot of really good material to say, okay, here are the strategies that can advance and preserve those values.
What are their hopes and their dreams and their priorities for the future? Then we take what we learn about Utahns' values and we look at all the different ways that we could shape Utah's future around those values. We create what we call scenarios, which are basically pictures of what the future could be. And we say, if we do X, Y, and Z, then the future might look like this. Or if we do something a little bit differently, then the future will also look a little bit differently. And then we take those scenarios and we give them to the public. We give everyone a voice. We bring everyone to the table and give them the chance to weigh in on what scenarios they want. It's not just about choosing what's your favorite. It's about learning what it takes to actually get to the futures that you might want.
We actually had public meetings, neighborhood meetings. People would show up at some location, have maps all around the room and on the table, and people would come and put their thoughts about how it should grow, where it should be high density here, commercial here, industrial here, roads we need to be able to get through here, and here's the arterial right-of-ways. So it was a very comprehensive approach, and it was bottom-up. It was grassroots. It's at the local level of people saying, here's what I want my neighborhood to look like, my community, my city, my county, and the state overall.
Often would see people come up after the 2-hour session and say, I see the world differently than I did a couple of hours ago. I've heard some perspectives that I didn't hear before. And I recognize that these issues are more challenging than I thought.
We gave them a roadmap for a conversation. We asked them to sit around their dining room table and have a discussion. What do you want your neighborhood to look like? And what are the trade-offs? And there are always trade-offs.
It makes us leaders, right? We all have some leadership role in defining our future.
But over time, we began and continued to refine a strategy.
The result of this process is a vision that has buy-in not just from a few select leaders, but from everyone across the state. We've all had a chance to weigh in and decide what we want the future to be, and now we have a strategy and a plan to be able to make that happen.
We initially developed the quality growth strategy. Utah continued to boom. We were growing better, and then came the major recession. All the visioning work sort of unwound everywhere. And so we designed Your Utah, Your Future to re-lift up the visions in Utah.
There were a lot of people who were new to the state who hadn't been through that process, and other people who had forgotten about it.
In Your Utah, Your Future, we took this same process and we applied it statewide to a broader range of topics, and we were looking out to the year 2050.
It brought together over 400 experts and leaders across those 11 topics, working on 8 action teams to help develop scenarios for the future.
We have almost 53,000 people that participated in what was the largest grassroots survey ever done in America.
There are a lot of projects that we have been working on for the last 7 years that have come out of Your Utah, Your Future. Everything from working on disaster resilience, future of education, point of the mountain visioning, visioning for Utah County, and even more recently now we're looking at how to keep our housing more affordable going forward.
The model and the process that Envision Utah created has been followed and copied and relied on across the country because it actually works. It had never been done before to that scale and with that much public engagement.
In Envision Utah speak, the process is a capital T and a capital P. It's the process.
That has percolated and become part of the way that we do all of our work in the planning space in this community.
It's become a way of life. Some people call it the Utah way of thinking about and making decisions.
I still get calls from other parts of the country asking about how did Utah do it? How did they become the gold standard?
The process was honest. The people were honest. We held each other to a standard of honesty about the scenarios that were being crafted, and it continues to be honest.
I love being able to look around and see the fruits of everyone's forethought and careful planning over the last 25 years.
In the late 90s, there were projections done of where we would be today. And if you look at what actually happened based on the visioning work that Envision Utah undertook, the way it's turned out is very different than what was projected.
We've seen real changes on the ground in terms of the amount of land being consumed.
Without Envision Utah, I don't believe we would have the light rail transit system we have.
We've reduced our travel times overall.
We've cut our emissions in half.
The commuter front runner rail.
We've cut our water use significantly per person.
The efficiency of our infrastructure system.
We've improved our housing mix so it's more affordable than it would have been otherwise.
The ability to model population growth, population projections, economic trends. Those are all legacies of Envision Utah to date. And then with all the work that continues to happen, we'll get more in the future.
Having taken over as CEO in 2020, I have the good fortune of building on so much good prior work that has happened. Envision Utah's reputation and the success of our work creates a great base to go forward and tackle the challenges that we face today, but our work is never done. We're still a growing state. We still have challenges.
The future is always there to prepare for.
Always looking forward, always thinking about how we can make life better for the next generation to follow.
We've had a phenomenal 25 years, and let's make the next 25 years even better.
I've said before, and I still firmly believe, the best is yet to come.
All right, my name is Jason Brown. I'm one of the vice presidents at Envision Utah, and it is my privilege tonight to get to invite to the stage some of the men and women whom I admire a lot, who have been part of Envision Utah since the beginning. These are those who have been with us a whole quarter century now. These are the people who gave their reputations, their time, their resources, their ingenuity for a yet untested and unproven process, and we are really excited that we get to honor them tonight. I wanted to show you the award that we're giving them is a telescope, and I originally was going to give a big, spiel of, talking about Galileo and telescopes and everything, but it's pretty on the nose for what we're trying to do here as a metaphor. We are trying to honor the discipline that it takes to look towards the future and to say, I'm going to try and make this place better for my own children, for my grandchildren. I want a state that I may not get to enjoy the full fruits of our work. So that's what we're honoring and celebrating tonight. So as I call your names and read or say just a couple words about you, I'd invite you to come up to the stage and then stay here. We want to have a group photo. We've been looking forward to this photo for a long time. So without further ado, I'd like to honor, let's see, our first honorary co-chair of Envision Utah, the first governor to lend his own vision and political clout to this work. Join me in thanking Governor Leavitt. Let's see. Larry H. Miller was the other honorary co-chair of Envision Utah's founding, and he was an instrumental leader in the early years. The Miller family has continued his legacy and has been an incredible partner and supporter. Amanda Covington is here to accept the award on behalf of Gail Miller and the Miller family. And then several leaders at Zions Bank, specifically Harris Simmons, David Simmons, and Scott Anderson, have been involved in Envision Utah since the beginning. They have been powerful community partners and generous financial supporters. And Kelly Peterson is here to accept the award on behalf of the bank. So, thank you. Governor Gary Herbert was a Utah County Commissioner who served as a vice chair at the launch of Envision Utah. Later, he was an honorary co-chair who helped convene and support the Your Utah, Your Future initiative. Please join me in honoring Governor Herbert. Wilf Summercorn has been one of the deans of planning in Utah for decades. He's been part of Envision Utah for its entire history. His expertise and leadership have been invaluable. Unfortunately, Wilf was not able to be here tonight, but it wouldn't be right not to recognize Wilf, so let's give him a hand as well. At our founding, Natalie Gochner was part of the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. She has been an involved and a critical partner ever since, and currently serves as a vice chair at Envision Utah. Please help me welcome up here Natalie Gochner as well. Then often called the Mother Teresa of Utah, Pamela Atkinson has been involved with Envision Utah also from the beginning. She chaired the Coalition for Utah's Future. 25 years later, she still serves on our executive committee. Unfortunately, Pamela as well was not able to be here tonight, but we are grateful for Pamela's years of service. So, hand for her. Oh, almost done here. Next, Dan Lofgren, a Common Good Awards recipient himself for his tremendous work in the community, has been a true leader of Envision Utah for 25 years. Dan also had some issues and was not able to make it tonight, but a hand for Dan. And then you can't properly tell the story of Envision Utah without talking about Robert Groh. The founding chair and longtime CEO, Robert is the primary architect behind the Envision Utah process, Your Utah, Your Future, and so much of the work that we have accomplished. Few people have demonstrated as much foresight nor done as much to shape the future of Utah as Robert Groh. And then last, but certainly not least, is a man who was laying the groundwork for Envision Utah at the Pat Creek Ranch Retreat more than a decade before Envision Utah began. He's not only part of the brain trust that created Envision Utah, but he has given his own resources to support the work we do. He has been an honorary co-chair since the earliest days, and he and his generous family have literally built and shaped communities across the state. Please join me in honoring Spencer F. Eccles, a true Utah visionary. Thank you for letting us do this photo shoot. We've been, for those who are fans of Envision Utah, this is like the 97 Jazz. It's a really big deal to have them all together. So thank you all for being here. One last hand for these Utah visionaries.
All right. My name is Ryan Beck. I'm the Vice President of Planning at Envision Utah, and I have the honor of announcing and helping us recognize 3 incredible organizations that have been integral in turning Utah's hopes and desires for the future into reality. So the thing about Envision Utah is that we have no jurisdiction, we have no authority. You can ask me if that's frustrating later, but so we rely on the people and organizations we work with to help make these hopes a reality. The following 3 organizations have been incredibly instrumental in implementing the future Utahns want. So as I say a little bit about each organization, I invite them to come to the stand, and please stay. We'll do a group photo like the last group. So for the first Visionary Partner Award, Rio Tinto Kennecott Copper was one of the largest private funders of the original quality growth strategy and has continued to be an important funder ever since. But it's much more than that. Kennecott intentionally set out to implement the quality growth strategy vision on its own land by planning and building the Daybreak community. It has a mix of housing, connected streets, trails, extensive open space, transit-oriented development. So it really is an excellent example of quality growth. But wait, there's even more. So earlier this year, Rio Tinto Kennecott leased over 100 acres of land in Butterfield Canyon to Salt Lake County with the hopes of creating more recreation opportunities. They also recently unveiled trial plans to implement battery-powered electric vehicles and renewable diesel fuel, all as a part of their efforts to innovate the future of environmentally friendly mining. Here to accept the Visionary Partner is Simone Slade, General Manager of Human Resources, Nicole Carlisle Squires, who is the Senior Legal Counsel, and Jeru Smith, who is the Senior Advisor of Communities and Social Performance. All right, for our second Visionary Partner Award, we have the Salt Lake Chamber. Time and time again, the Salt Lake Chamber has stepped up to help implement the future vision for Utah. When Utahns overwhelmingly chose a future scenario with significant passenger rail, the Chamber took action with the legislature to increase the headroom to allow sales tax increases to pay for that rail, and then helped lead the campaign and ask Utahns to vote for that increase. The Chamber has been an important partner in Your Utah, Your Future, in our education projects and our disaster resiliency projects. Ginger Chin, who is the Vice President of Public Policy, is here to accept the award. Let's give him a big round of applause. All right, and last but certainly not least, we have the Wasatch Front Regional Council. All right, the Wasatch Front Regional Council's involvement with Envision Utah goes way back. It goes way back to the quality growth strategy when the late Mick Crandall helped run the transportation models that informed those original quality growth strategy scenarios. Since then, WFRC has become a great partner in planning to achieve the things that Utahns want for their lives. As an example, when Utah said they wanted that passenger rail, WFRC's board reopened their regional transportation plan and added many, many miles of rail. Over the years, they've continued to plan for roads, public transportation, as well as active transportation. WFRC, in conjunction with cities, has recognized that transportation and land use must be planned together. Here to accept the Visionary Partner, Andrew Gruber, the director of WFRC. We have Ted Knowlton, who is the deputy director, South Jordan Mayor Don Ramsey, and Mill Creek Mayor Jeff Silverstrini. Let's give them a big round of applause. And I have to say thank you to Charlie Lanch, who provided the beautiful photos in the awards. So if you know Charlie, say thank you. He's been part of the board. He's been with Envision Utah for quite a while. So thank you. One more round of applause for this group.
Okay, and I'm sorry I'm coming up one more time. I owe a huge apology to one of our Utah visionaries who I skipped over in the announcements, who is here tonight. Jeff Hatch participated in Project 2000 way back when, and then in the Coalition for Utah's Future, and donated countless hours over many, many years as the longtime volunteer treasurer. So Jeff, I apologize that I forgot to call your name, but let's give a round of applause for Jeff Hatch.
All right, thank you again to all the visionaries and partners who are the reason we're celebrating 25 successful years tonight. And I just want to let you know, I tested one of those telescopes outside our office earlier today, and it works. So if you were planning on getting into bird watching or stargazing, we're glad we could help. Now it's my honor to introduce Governor Cox tonight. So beginning with Governor Leavitt, each of Utah's governors has been an honorary co-chair of Envision Utah. I should also note that we seem to provide a good platform for launching people into the governor's office. So Gary Herbert was county commissioner when he was vice chair of Envision Utah, later became governor. John Huntsman Jr. was chair of Envision Utah before he ran for governor, became governor. So Doug, I don't know what's in your future. So in the decade I've been with Envision Utah, the governor, beginning with Governor Herbert and then Governor Cox, has always been a part of these Common Good Awards. And that's pretty impressive and inspiring. I don't even want to guess how many different events and other things are pressures on their time during November and December. But they always make time. Governor Cox, Governor Herbert, thank you for making time to come to these events and celebrate the good that's being done for the future of our state. Now, one of the earliest interactions we had at Envision Utah with Governor Cox was when he was lieutenant governor, and we went on a media tour in 2015 to promote public engagement in the Your Utah, Your Future effort, and we just really enjoyed working with him on that. And since then, we've had a chance to work with him and his staff on a number of projects, and I want to thank him for being a visionary in his own right. We've really appreciated how he's embraced Utahns' hopes, desires, and visions for the future. I must say, when we saw just last week the budget that he released, it felt like a blueprint for all the things that we'd been working on for the last several years. And so teacher pay, water conservation, housing, disaster resilience, you name it. And not to mention his focus on elevating rural Utah, and then the partnership with him and his office on the Guiding Our Growth conversation that they're helping drive. Once again, go take the survey, guidingourgrowth.utah.gov. So thank you, Governor Cox, for being a Utah visionary in your own right, and we look forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you, Ari, for that very kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor to be here with you tonight in this beautiful place on this beautiful snowy night. We're so excited for the snow that is falling out there. Of course, we know that water is one of the issues that is facing the West. Ari mentioned a little bit about the budget proposal that we made to any of our legislators that are here. I understand this is just a proposal. Don't get me wrong. But we believe, and we've worked very closely with the legislature in crafting this budget proposal, that it does represent the very best of our state and opportunities as we continue to grow. And as Ari mentioned, it is no coincidence that so much of what is in that budget proposal are the very things that Envision Utah has been working on over the past few years, and the proposals that they have put forward. That is the very essence of who we are and why we're here tonight. But I do have to say, there is one line in there that nobody picked up on yet. You can dive into the budget. I'm sure most of you have looked at those proposals. Thousands of line items that are just riveting to those of us who care about this. But buried deep in the recesses of the budget is $5 million for flood mitigation, because some of us have more faith than the rest of you. So we're so excited that the snow is coming. Now, if we need that flood mitigation in the spring, I'm going to be the first one to hold up my budget and prove to everyone that we didn't that I had it in there. If we don't, then we'll never speak of it again. But we're very hopeful, and hope springs eternal. I was so grateful for Ari's words tonight and for that incredible video. I knew, because I had read and talked to many of you about how this organization came to be. But as a student of history and the history of our state, I still, it's hard for me to believe, probably because I was in middle school in the 80s and went into high school in the 90s, but that we were a state without migration for so many years, those economic struggles. I actually went back to the election of 1992, and I know Governor Leavitt had to leave. He had another engagement with the choir tonight. But I went back and I read some of the debates that happened during the primary and the general election, and the discussion that was happening in 1992. And it feels not just like it comes from a different time, but it comes from a different world, talking about how Utah's economy was struggling, how difficult things had become, and what was going to happen. How could we try to elevate our state? How could we play with the big boys? How could we figure out how to punch above our weight? Again, that seems quaint and a whole world away, as we have literally had the best economy in the nation now for more than a decade, almost 2 decades now. And I have to say, as I look around this room, I get a little emotional, because it's very easy for politicians, and indeed this is kind of what we do, to pat ourselves on the back and take victory laps when our unemployment is at 2.1% as it is now. We got down to 1.9% at one time. By the way, I thought it would be really cool to be a governor with unemployment at record lows of 1.9%. Not as cool as I thought it was going to be as we face these labor challenges now, right? Our challenges have changed, but I know that's what politicians do. But as I look around this room, and as I travel around the country, as I talk to other governors, and I think about what makes Utah different, I get asked that often. What is it that makes Utah different? What is it that makes Utah special? And I am here to tell you, it is this room. The people in this room, you over the past 20, 30 years, are the people that have made Utah so different and made Utah so great. And this organization was a way to intentionally, formulaically, procedurally bring the best of our state together and work together to find those answers to the problems that vexed us. And that is exactly what you did. This success is not politicians, and it is not accidental. It is very much intentional. And it's people putting aside their maybe own personal ideas, or bringing those ideas to the table, a willingness to collaborate, a willingness to come together and solve those problems. I had the unique opportunity of serving with who I believe was the best governor in the United States. He was the dean of governors, the longest serving governor at one point in our nation. He was the chair of the National Governors Association, and he had this quote that he would use all the time. I don't know where he got it. I may have heard it somewhere before, but he always said, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." I don't know if it was original to him. It may have come from somewhere else. But he would always bring that up, of course, quoting Proverbs. And he's exactly right. And far too often in our nation today, there is a lack of vision. Right? The people who are supposed to be leading us are spending more time with their heads down instead of their heads up, more time dividing us instead of bringing us together, causing more problems to gain more power or to embarrass the other side, than actually putting forward a vision that can unite and bring us together and lift us up. We are so very fortunate to have had leaders in this state, not just governors, but from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, from the faith-based sector, who came together to unite around a vision. My first opportunity with Envision Utah, as was mentioned, came with the Your Utah, Your Future project. And I remember very distinctly the first time I sat down with Robert Groh. And those of you who have had the opportunity to sit down and talk to Robert Groh, you remember the first time you sit down and talk to Robert Groh, because his mind is going a million miles an hour, and there's so much depth and breadth to what he is thinking and seeing and, of course, envisioning. And I'm so grateful for his leadership, and as that baton has been passed on to Ari and his team, that continues. And we are so incredibly fortunate to have this type of leadership. You make me look very, very good. And I am eternally grateful for the things that you are doing. Now, I'm supposed to be talking about housing, and I'm going to in the 3 minutes that I have left. Ari mentioned this paradox, right? This idea that things are so good here that people want to enjoy that, especially our kids and grandkids, and so we grow. But as we grow, that creates a set of problems. Now, I want to emphasize it tonight that growth is neutral. Growth is neither bad nor good. Right? Growth is what we make it. And far too often, we just accept things as they are or assume that the future is written in the stars, and that future is not written in the stars. That future is written in our hearts and in our wills, in our ability, the will of us as a community to come together and determine what that future is going to be. And so it is with housing. Yes, the nation is facing a housing shortage. Yes, the price of housing has been unsustainable for a long time. Yes, we are seeing the price of housing come down. But the reason the price of housing has come down is because the Fed has decided to raise interest rates to artificially destroy demand. That is unacceptable. I refuse to believe that we are going to live in a state where our kids and grandkids are going to be worse off than their parents. I do not accept that as a reality, and neither should you, and we are not going to as a state. And so, what must be done? Well, it's very simple. In fact, the good thing about this problem is it's actually the one where everyone knows the answer. It is purely supply side. We just need more houses. Period. End of story. There is nothing else, folks. Okay? And the thing is, we all know that we want our kids and children to be able to afford a house. I have a son who just got engaged. I'm thinking about these things too, right? And we all know that we want our kids to live near us. That's what makes Utah so special. We do have kids coming back. In fact, more people have returned to the state of Utah to live than any other state over the past several years, and it's not even close. About 25% of our growth are people who have lived here before coming back to live here again. Like the next closest state, I don't remember, it's like, I don't know, like 11% or something like that. It's crazy. We want our kids and grandkids to live near us. We do not want them to live with us, okay? And the only way to make that happen is to build more housing. Now, again, growth is neither good nor bad. The problem we have is that everybody knows we need more housing. Everybody wants more housing. They just don't want it where they can see it, right? Not in our backyard. We want it somewhere else. And that's not acceptable. We have to reject the paradox. We have to reject this false choice that we either have to have more housing or a high standard of living. We can have both. We know that. We have proven that, and we can do it smartly. We can do it together, working with our local governments. And so you are going to see, not just in my budget proposal, but this year you will see a very important bill that we are working on right now with our mayors and city councils who are here tonight. We love you. We appreciate your leadership in this space as well. We know that government is part of the problem. We know that government is adding to the price of housing. Every decision we make around zoning, every decision we make that takes longer than it should take adds to the price of housing. Every decision we make about the infrastructure that we're putting into place adds to the price of housing. These are the things that we have to solve, and they can be solved, and if they can be solved anywhere, it will be here in the state of Utah because we collaborate, because we work together, because 25 years ago, some brilliant men and women got together in a room and said, we are going to determine the future of our state and we are going to make it better. And we will do it again because of you. Thank you for your hope. Thank you for your help. And may God bless you in this effort.
Governor Cox, thank you so much for, first of all, being here tonight, serving as an honorary chair, and also for your comments tonight. And you know, in the time that I've known our governor and known him in several different capacities, I've just so appreciated his optimism. I've so appreciated his leadership, and I've so appreciated his compassion, which has meant a great deal to me. And it's things like that. And as I look around this room, as the governor mentioned, there's leadership everywhere in this room that can help us attain these goals. And appreciate our past, which we have done tonight. Live in the future only to a degree that today is here, the present is here, but look to the future. Boy, that's an important thing. And so again, thank you, Governor. Thank you to all the people in this room that the governor referred to, the leadership and the people that are here that can make these things happen. It's time to turn our focus. We've looked a lot, as I've mentioned, to the past, but boy, it's time to look at what we're dealing with right now. To an organization who is working right now to make Utah better, more affordable, more prosperous for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of families. It's time for the centerpiece of our event, the reason we are gathered here tonight, and it's this year's Common Good Awards. And I'm going to turn things over to, again, a great leader in our state, a dear friend of mine and of my family, someone who has served the great state of Utah in many capacities, including as my representative in the state legislature and also as a senator in the state legislature. Please welcome to the podium Patrice Arendt, who will introduce us to this year's Common Good Award recipient. Patrice.
Thank you very much, Doug. And thank you also to the governor for his wonderful words tonight. I remember Governor Cox when he first came to the legislature. He wasn't there for one term. He was there for one session, as I recall, and had barely found the bathroom at the time he became lieutenant governor. I'm honored to be part of this event tonight and to be on the executive committee of Envision Utah. I am thrilled to be able to introduce our 2022 Common Good Award winner. How many times, including tonight, have we heard that rents are too high and that many Utahns cannot afford a place to live? Sadly, there are many families that will just be left out of our housing market. But as individuals and communities, we have a responsibility to help provide the stability and dignity that comes with having a place to live, a home. Tonight, we honor and celebrate the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, an innovative, outstanding organization that helps to provide that stability and dignity to hundreds and eventually thousands of Utahns. The Utah Housing Preservation Fund does this by helping to preserve Utah's existing affordable housing through purchasing, remodeling, and then renting out housing at stable and affordable rates. While building new housing is an important piece of the solution, housing preservation ensures that affordable housing that currently exists doesn't disappear because it's been bought up by private investors, and preservation is often 10 times faster than building new homes. This all happens, as many things do, through partnerships with government entities, nonprofits, philanthropists, and community banks. And there's also wraparound services provided through partnerships with Intermountain Healthcare. I can't possibly mention all the community leaders and staff that have been involved, but I did want to acknowledge Clark Ivory, who was the founder of the fund. The fund started in March of 2020 and is managed through the Utah Nonprofit Housing Corporation. Its goal is to preserve thousands of affordable rental units and to improve the health outcomes for low and moderate income Utahns. To date, over $157 million has been committed, and the fund has already preserved over 644 affordable housing units. They've been rented to over 1,400 tenants, including many who are refugees, homeless, and veterans. The average tenant saves $320 a month. The fund currently has units in Salt Lake, Tooele, and Summit counties with the goal to preserve affordable housing statewide. And we know there's a serious problem in rural Utah in places like Eureka and Boulder. For their innovative and important work preserving affordable housing, which provides the security and stability to many Utah residents, Envision Utah is honored to present the 2022 Common Good Award to the Utah Housing the Utah Housing Preservation Fund. What a mistake. They are a wonderful organization, and I hope that you could really acknowledge the incredible work they've done and the work they will do in the future with our help. Thank you so much.
We are not just experiencing a housing shortage. This is a crisis.
It's alarming to me that our kids don't have any place that they can live and stay here. I mean, this is an incredible state. It's the best place on earth to raise a family and make a living.
These people are, one medical bill away from disaster. They're one car payment away from losing their car and then not being able to make it to work. These folks are on the edge.
Everyone should have an equal opportunity to prosper.
Timing's everything. I think once we get down the road a few years, we've lost our opportunity. And I think right now is our opportunity to preserve some of this affordable housing. Critical, honestly.
The housing challenge we have is, in its simplest form, a basic economic challenge of supply and demand.
So you have a home that rents for $800 or an apartment for $800. It's purchased, it's remodeled, and now it rents for $1,800. It prices people out of having secure and safe housing.
There is no way that the government by itself can solve that problem. We have to have the private sector come in and help fix the supply and demand challenges we have.
So we saw very clearly that we needed to have a nonprofit tool that could intervene and be able to go in and outbid some of these big groups.
We are investing in creating more affordable housing in the communities we serve because it's one of the greatest social goods we think we can be a part of.
We'd been underfunded for decades, and we just could not take care of the units at the level that we wanted to, and they needed to be taken care of.
It does leverage private dollars in a really significant way to help solve one of the biggest challenges we have in the state, which is to have enough housing.
We were very pleased to hear that the fund had put in a proposal to buy the units. And from my perspective, it was a win-win. It was a no-brainer.
If we want to maintain the quality of life that we are enjoying now for our grandchildren, we have to ensure that we're preserving housing, that we have affordable housing, so that everyone in Utah, regardless of the age, regardless if you're single or married or have children, that you can have safe, affordable housing.
This problem is not going away. We are totally committed to it, and we will never let go. And we hope we'll have a lot of people that go along with us on this ride to make this happen.
My name is Marion Willie. I'm the director of Utah Nonprofit Housing Corporation, and I want to thank you. It's truly an honor for the Utah Preservation Fund to receive the Common Good Award this year. Oh, I thought somebody was yelling at me. Thank you, Envision Utah, for your efforts and progress in bettering our communities, and congratulations on 25 years. You have continued to truly make an impact on critical issues facing our state today. Our communities focus on making sure there is a place for everyone. As of today, our units provide affordable housing for 1,400 individuals that would otherwise be displaced and not have their housing. I've been working with Utah Nonprofit Housing Development for over 30 years, and it's a joy to watch the legacy of Envision Utah honor something like this. Now more than ever, we need innovation solutions and great leadership on issues like affordable housing, and it's exciting to both come together. Look at my time clock. None of this would be possible without the generous contributions of our investors and significant leadership in the state of Utah. So I'd like to thank the state of Utah. Governor Cox, we were going through some pictures of the day at our office because we're trying to do some things, and I found pictures of you on the Housing Task Force. I found Governor Herbert's pictures. This is a long time ago. And then I found Governor Levitt. He did one of our first open houses in the 90s. So you have been a part of, the governors have been a part of affordable housing. And so I'm thankful to the state of Utah. You guys have done a great job, and now more than ever. I bought my first house in the 80s. I paid $13,000 at 13% interest. And I said, this is a good deal. The same house today sold not more than 3 months ago for $450,000. I should have kept that house. But I want to thank Utah Nonprofit and Zion's Bank and Clark and Christy Ivory. If it wasn't for Clark coming to me and said, Marion, I want you to do this. Help me do this. I said, Clark, I'm tired. He said, just do it for 10 years. I said, I'll be 77. He said, well, then do it for 6. But I'm grateful to Clark. He's been a friend of mine for 30 years. I sit on the only Walker board with him. But Intermountain Health Care, Workers' Compensation Fund of Utah, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, American Express, Larry and Gail Miller family, Community Bank, Key Bank, George S. and Dolores Eccles Foundation, and Lucas is the fund manager. And we appreciate everybody. I'm going to just say one quick thing. I'm out of time, but I want to let the Eccles family know that 20-some years ago, Lisa Eccles gave us $50,000 because we needed to close in our office for a management company. There was a staff of 2, myself and somebody else. And now we have a staff of 100. But I asked Lisa, and Lisa remembered that 20-some years ago that they gave us that $50,000, and it's made all the difference. You guys help thousands and thousands of people in Utah. You have no idea. I'm there every day, and I see people struggle and can't pay their rent, can't pay their dentist bill, can't do these things. And you have helped immensely. You'll actually never know how much you help. And again, I appreciate being honored today and looking forward to continue to work with all of you because you're amazing people. And thank you again.
I think another round of applause would be in great order here. Thank you. Congratulations again to everyone at the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, and thank you for all that you do and all of the selfless work. And it's time now to look at the future. We've been in the past, we've dealt with the present, and now to look at the future as we consider one of our toughest issues here in the state of Utah, and that's housing. Where are our kids going to live, and where are our grandkids going to live? I love what the governor said. We want them to live around us, not with us, but around us. I'll be stealing that line in speeches, I assure you. I'm going to introduce somebody very important here who will introduce our keynote speaker. But if I might, first, I'd like to point out that right after our keynote speaker's comments and her message for us, we'll have a brief Q&A at the end of her remarks. And you can submit your questions right now by texting them to 801-308-1458. And then on your behalf, I'll ask your questions as the doctor and I discuss what she had to say and then also what you have questions about. Howard Hockhauser of Ancestry, another one of our, along with Patrice Arendt just a moment ago, another one of our very dedicated executive committee members of Envision Utah, will now introduce our keynote speaker. Howard?
Intro for the introer. So Ari had called me and asked me to introduce Dr. Schuetz, and I thought I would do it by a quick story that I think we could all relate to. So I came home from work. I work in Lehigh, and my wife had that look on her face when you sort of did something, you're not sure how your partner's going to react. So she was at the talking to the principal at my son's public school, and their beloved computer science teacher had left, took a higher paying job elsewhere, and they were trying to replace that teacher. And they actually found a lot of qualified candidates, but time and time again, each candidate had pulled out because they couldn't find housing. So it's really disappointing, right? They had this great quality of applicants, and great teachers make great communities, and they just couldn't bring somebody in. Ultimately, they did. And the funny part of the story is the reason of my wife was making the face is that she had offered the principal our spare bedroom for the teacher to stay in. So, but seriously, at Ancestry, we face this issue. We're recruiting people all the time for the snow that the governor mentioned, the parks, the trails, and the housing. You could live here and really have a high quality of life, whether you rent or own, and that now is coming under more and more pressure. So with housing affecting so many aspects of life in Utah, we thought it was appropriate to end the program today talking about it, why we're experiencing some growing pains, and to talk about some potential solutions. So Dr. Jenny Schuetz is a senior fellow at Brookings Metro as an expert in urban economics and housing policy. She's written numerous peer-reviewed journal articles on land use regulation, housing prices, urban amenities, and neighborhood change. You can find some of her work in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Indicator podcast, Vox, and Slate. And this is not Jenny's first trip to Utah, and I'm sure it won't be her last. And I think you'll find she has some very interesting data points to share that Doug will come out in the Q&A session. And you're welcome, as Doug had said, to text in your questions. I'll repeat the number to 801-303-1453. That number is also in your program if you didn't write it down. So with that, let me welcome Dr. Jenny Schuetz to the stage.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you tonight. Thank you to Envision Utah for letting me come and share some thoughts with you. So this is the second time in about a year that I have been to Utah. Last year I came out to speak at the Ivory Innovation Award ceremony and started hearing some of the comments from people here, from elected officials, from the State Housing Affordability Commission about how important this issue is. And it turns out that I have just finished writing a book, Fixer Upper: How to Repair America's Broken Housing Systems, which takes a national view of housing problems across the country. But everything that I'm going to tell you today, I think, is going to resonate. Utah is a microcosm of the nation's housing problems, but for cause for more optimism, Utah also has the seeds of some of the solutions. And in fact, you in both your cities and in your state house are doing some of the most innovative things around housing affordability. And so I hope that you continue doing that so that I can tell everybody else the great things that Utah is doing. So Governor Cox has already given away essentially the plot line of my book, which is that we need to build more homes, but I'll put a little addendum on that. We need to build more homes where people want to live. This is, of course, one of the unique features of housing. You can't build a bunch of homes in Oklahoma if people want to live in Utah. We actually have to build them where people want to live. So this graph is showing you what housing production adjusted for population looks like going back to about 1970. Those of you who are in the real estate industry will recognize that this is a very cyclical business. It goes up and down with the business cycle, with things like interest rates. But we've been on a gradual downward trend for about 30 years, and then the Great Recession hit, right? That's the trough at the end of the graph. Housing production almost ground to a halt nationally for about 4 or 5 years. We just didn't build any homes. And we started to pick back up again, but had not yet gotten back to the level where we were. So nationally, we are a decade in the hole. The best estimates are that we need about 3.8 million homes nationwide. Utah needs about 250,000 more homes by 2030, which is getting closer by the day. So we have just a huge deficit of homes, and this is not something that we can wish away, right? We have to build homes. We need to build them where people want to live, close to jobs, close to transit, in communities with high amenities. Raise your hand if that sounds like Utah. You guys are one of the states that has the highest growth rate, right? I don't need to tell you this, you all live with it. But this map gives you a little bit of an overview of the country. So this is a tool that I developed working with the National Association of Counties. And you can see from the colors that there are really different housing market conditions. Red and orange are places that are growing in population and where housing is expensive, where housing is out of reach for many households. Green are places where markets are relatively balanced, and then blue are places that have been losing population, right? And it's worth taking a step back and remembering growth is hard, it creates some pressures. Degrowth is much, much harder, right? Ask your mayors and your county supervisors, would you rather have a county where everybody wants to move because there's so many great jobs and such great communities, Or would you rather be the leader of a community where people have been moving away for 50 years, where jobs are moving away, where your tax base is shrinking and you have aging infrastructure to maintain, right? Growth is hard, but the lack of growth is actually much, much harder and much harder to change with policy tools. Utah, you can see from this, is a mixture of colors. Some of the communities, particularly in the Salt Lake Metro, are red hot, they're expensive. Some of the communities are still very balanced, but that also means that this is a good time for the state to get involved, to get out in front of the housing affordability. I'm going to come back to it a couple of times. You'll notice that California is basically all red. You don't want to become California. You know that. And so what we want to think about today are the kinds of policy solutions that can help you from getting to that point. It's not that we stopped building housing because the market doesn't want to build, right? Real estate developers know how to build homes. They would love to build homes in the places where there's very strong demand. So what's the problem? We, voters, citizens, have created a system of rules and regulations and policies that make it hard to build housing, especially in high demand locations. So things like zoning codes that say that it's illegal to build anything except a single family detached house on a big piece of land. This is so ubiquitous that even in major cities, in places like Salt Lake, in cities like Dallas and in Los Angeles, and even in places like much of New York, it is illegal to build anything except a single family detached house on most land. Forget about skyscrapers. You can't build a townhouse. You can't build a duplex. You can't build a walk-up garden apartment, which used to be sort of the backbone of working housing in this country. If you walk through our older neighborhoods, you'll see we used to build blocks that had a mixture of housing on the same street. Taller, shorter, different shapes. When the streets come together at a funny angle, you just fit the building into that. So the housing stock was diverse. It accommodated the infrastructure that we had already built. You could accommodate different kinds of homes. We also used to build more retail and services mixed in with housing. So very common pattern to have retail on the ground floor, things like coffee shops and grocery stores so that people can satisfy their daily needs within a few minutes walk from their house, right? Those are the kinds of neighborhoods that we built before zoning, and if you walk around any of your communities, you will see vestiges of these neighborhoods that existed before the regulations we created today. What's legal to build now? Most of our, particularly our larger suburban developments, you have to build single-family detached homes, the same size house on the same size piece of land, set back the same distance from the front and from the sides, 2-car garages so we have off-street parking. This creates neighborhoods that look like this, right? So think about what this is implying. We have homes of the same size, built at the same time on the same piece of land. They're all going to cost about the same amount of money, right? One of the downsides of building these very homogeneous communities is that it's really hard for people at different income levels to move into this community, right? The price of entrance is being able to buy a $500,000 or an $800,000 house. If you don't have the money, if you don't have the credit, the down payment, you simply don't have access to the community and all of the amenities. Think also about what this means for the age distribution of who can live there. We think of single-family suburbs as being family-friendly, and they are for some stage of your life, but how many 25-year-olds need a 5-bedroom house? How many 65-year-olds whose kids have moved out need a 5-bedroom house and want to maintain that through their retirement, right? These are actually communities that are much harder for age-diverse communities, for multi-generational families to live in. We used to have more neighborhoods where you could have people at different stages of their life staying in the same community. Many of our older adults would love to age in place, but if you don't want to live in and maintain a house like this, it's very hard to stay in the same community as you get older. Should say also, notice that these big houses that are set far apart from one another cost more to build in infrastructure. You need more asphalt to build the roads, you need more sidewalks, you need more pipes for the water and sewer, not just for the building, but for the maintenance. This costs more to plow, right? So for communities that are thinking, how do we make housing more affordable? It's both on the structures themselves, but it's also all of the infrastructure which local governments have to pay for. It's important to recognize that it's not just about rules that are written down on paper. This isn't just about some dry legal document. It's very much about the political process by which housing is approved or all too often denied and delayed. So this may be familiar to you. I live in the East Coast. We have a lot of communities that consider themselves to be very progressive on economic grounds, on social grounds. And so we sort of have this joke that a lot of communities will have a Black Lives Matter in their front yard in a community where no black people live, where no low-income people live because it's so expensive, right? And the people who say they believe in social justice and equity and opportunity for all don't want opportunity in their neighborhoods. They are the same people who come to community meetings and say, I don't want that apartment. Those people will move here. I don't want apartments. They will bring down my property values. They will change the character of my neighborhood, right? Some of this is about aesthetics. Some of it's about who lives in the communities, right? But we have to understand that local governments listening to their existing residents, especially longtime homeowners, have disproportionate power over what gets built in a community and what doesn't get built, right? But the people who would benefit most from building this housing don't live in that community yet, right? They're people who are still young, who are growing, who haven't moved here yet, who might be moving into the region for jobs, and they don't have a voice in the political process. But as we're here today talking about the future, what is going to happen to Utah in the next 25 years, people who need a place to live in the future ought to be considered in the decisions, right? The people who live here now are not the only ones whose voices should matter. I wanted to switch gears a little bit from talking about the overall supply problem to talk about the specific problem of low-income households. So we know that there are places in this country where housing is very expensive for almost everyone, but it's also true that low-income households everywhere in the US can't afford to pay for market-rate housing without some sort of subsidy. In expensive places, cheaper places, in big cities, small towns, rural areas, the poorest 20% of households are spending more than half of their income every month on housing, which leaves them less than $500 to pay for everything else. $500 to pay for food, transportation, healthcare, clothing, you name it. And that's just not enough to cover basic expenses. The last 2.5 years have been especially hard for low-wage workers, many of whom worked in service and lost some of their hours or lost their jobs. Homelessness has been increasing in our major cities, and two of the groups with the fastest growing rate of homelessness are families with children and older adults, right? This is not the kind of society most of us want to live in. It's not just a problem for poor people who can't afford their rent. This is a problem for all of us. We have families with kids who are homeless, who are going to school and coming home and sleeping in a car. They can't do their homework, right? We have people who are living in poor quality homes that have toxins that will make them sick. If we want to have a healthy, productive workforce 20 years from now, we need to invest in better quality living environments, homes, and neighborhoods for all of our children today. The flip side of not building enough homes in the right places is that we have built and continue to build too many homes in the wrong places from a climate standpoint. We saw yet again this fall, Hurricane Ian wiped out many, many homes in Florida. We have been increasing our building in the coasts, in areas that are subject to hurricanes year after year. They are devastated, and we rebuild them in the same locations. In the western United States, in Utah, in Colorado, in California, we are building more and more homes on the outskirts of communities in the wildlife-urban interface, even though we know that those are at the highest risk of burning. And when houses burn down, we often rebuild them in the same locations, creating more risk there. We are also building houses in places that maybe don't have enough water, right? At some point, we have to figure out how to channel the development into places that are sustainable. All of us are paying federal tax dollars for disaster recovery. We should be building fewer homes in places that we will have to pay to replace and that put people at high risk of living there. We've heard a lot tonight about the importance of homeownership as a wealth-building mechanism. The US has relied on homeownership. For most middle-income families, it's their largest single financial asset. And homeownership can be a great mechanism to build wealth. You buy a home, take out a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, pay it down over time. You don't have to think about whether or not you're saving money in your piggy bank every month. It just goes into your mortgage payment, and you build up equity over time. So that's a fantastic mechanism, assuming you can get your foot in the door. But what we also know is that homeownership is the source of the racial wealth gap and the primary contributor to it. Younger white households, when they buy their first home, are likely to get assistance with down payment from parents or grandparents, Black and Latino households are less likely to get a gift to be able to buy their first home because their parents and grandparents were not able to be homeowners themselves. It's relatively recent in the US history that it has been illegal to discriminate based on race and ethnicity. So today, more than 70% of white households own their home. Fewer than half of Black and Latino households do. And even when we look just at homeowners, Black and Latino households have substantially less home equity, which means they have less wealth to tap. So if we want to encourage younger households to be able to get into homeownership, to get their first foot on the rung of building wealth, we have to consider the historic disparities, many of which were actually created by public policies. Local governments, how many local government officials do we have in the room tonight? Decent number. So local governments are in charge of this process of approving housing, and local governments are often in a very difficult position. Politically, they have constituents who make their wishes known. They also are responsible for paying for a lot of the services that people use. K through 12 schools, public safety, transportation, parks, libraries, many of these amenities are paid for primarily by local governments, and the money has to come from somewhere, right? More than half of the revenue comes from property taxes. That means that local governments are very sensitive to the types of properties that are being built in their communities and how much revenue they bring in. So the calculation becomes, if you're going to build a subdivision with, say, $1.5 million houses, a 1% tax on property values will bring in more money to the local government than if you're building, say, one-bedroom condos, right? Modest homes don't bring in as much revenue per house, and local governments are trying to figure out how much it will cost them in services. There's a very pervasive belief that apartments, and especially apartments for lower income households, affordable subsidized apartments, don't pay for themselves in a fiscal sense, which then becomes part of the calculation of what kinds of projects get approved. And I will say that the research doesn't show that moderate income housing is necessarily a net cost, because often these are smaller households who actually use less in public services. In addition, when you build denser housing, you put more homes on the same piece of land, and so in net you are actually bringing in more revenue. But this is one of the tough calculations that local governments have to make, and making sure that it is easier for local governments to say yes to housing is one thing that the state government can help with. So to solve all of these problems, we're going to need systemic policy changes at every level of government. Local governments are the primary entities that write the rules for what kind of housing can be built and what the process is. Ultimately, local governments are going to need to make it easier to build a diverse range of housing at diverse price points. Different kinds of structures, homeownership, rental, available to households at a much wider range of income. And we know that for regions, this is an economic competitiveness issue. The companies who work in Utah don't employ people all at the same salary. They employ workers at a wide range of pay, and so we need housing for all sorts of workers. State governments have a number of important roles that they can play. I'm glad to see that Utah has been experimenting with creating financial carrots and sticks in various ways. It is important for states to recognize the fiscal realities of local governments, so helping offset things like infrastructure costs, make it easier for local governments to say yes, providing things like technical assistance to local governments who maybe don't have the professional staff to do a zoning rewrite. Those are all ways to help. Those are not punitive. Those are just making it easier for all of us. But it's also going to be the case that if some local governments adamantly refuse to build the housing where it's needed or refuse to accommodate more diverse kinds of price points, state governments have some sticks that they can employ. They can try to encourage this, but also think about what sort of consequences there may be for local governments that really don't want to provide their fair share of housing. The federal government has a minimal role in land use, but the most important thing the federal government could do is to provide more financial support for low-income households. This is not just a Utah problem. This is not isolated to any region of the country. Only the federal government has deep enough pockets to support all of the poor households across this country and make sure that they all have access to decent quality housing in safe and healthy neighborhoods. None of the policy suggestions that I've made tonight are my original ideas, I hate to say. Many of these have been around for decades. We know the policies that can get us more housing, more affordable housing, and better communities. It's not knowing the policies. The problem is that the politics are wicked hard. Every local government is fighting this. Every community meeting that you go to is having the same arguments. And in order to get all of our communities moving in the same direction, we're going to need more coordination. I like to bring up again the scare tactic of telling you, don't become California. If you haven't been following what's been going on in Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley, the flagship university, wants to expand their freshman admissions, giving more kids the opportunity to go to college, many of whom are first generation. This produces enormous amounts of knowledge that all of us benefit from. The university wants to expand housing. A handful of long-term homeowners in Berkeley have decided that they don't want more neighbors. Students will put too much pressure on the housing market, but also they don't want the university to build more student housing. And so they have sued under the State Environmental Quality Act to stop this expansion of the university. The governor of California, UC Berkeley, and Berkeley City Council all want to build more housing, and a handful of homeowners are able to stop that. This is not a process that works. This is not a functional process. Utah is nowhere near this, but I just hold this up as an example of what you want to avoid becoming. And I will say that the more expensive housing becomes, the more toxic the politics, and the harder it is to get people to engage in good faith conversations. I think you guys are at a great point to engage in these. I know that there are a lot of conversations already, and I'm encouraged by the fact that local governments and the state are talking, and that there is also bipartisan interest in doing something productive. So thank you for inviting me to come speak with you tonight. I wrote the book not for housing policy wonks, but to reach a larger audience. Many people who live in comfortable communities don't think that this is a problem that affects them personally, but we are all paying for the cost of dysfunctional systems, not enough housing, of people being priced out. So I hope that you take these remarks and think about them, and I look forward to hearing all of the wonderful things that Utah is doing to make housing more affordable for everyone. Thank you.
Dr. Schuetz, thank you very much. Very interesting. And this is a huge problem, as you pointed out, around the country. Some states almost paralyzed by it. And here in the state of Utah, it was mentioned this earlier, deal with the problems when you still can. So we have asked our, almost said listeners, I wonder why. We have asked those in the audience to participate and to submit questions, as you know. So I'm just going to go through those. Their thoughts are a whole lot more important than what my questions might be at this point. But this question came in very, very early in your comments. Are backyard ADUs, accessory dwelling units, a viable housing solution? And what incentive is there for current homeowners to build an ADU?
ADUs have definitely become one of the popular flavors of housing reform. So for those who are not familiar with it, the idea is that a primary house can create a backyard cottage, maybe over a garage or in a basement. And ADUs add a lot of flexibility. So, there's no reason to prohibit it, is one way to look at this. This adds the option for homeowners to bring in some extra income, or say for people who don't want to live with their kids, but they want their kids in the backyard. That can be a way to accommodate multi-generational families, which is terrific. It's not by itself going to solve our entire housing problem, both because we can't build enough ADUs to build our way out of 250,000 units, and it's also not going to be probably the most affordable option for the way something like a large apartment building would be. The other part, of course, is to think about where we would add ADUs. They would go in single-family neighborhoods. We know that a lot of people want to live close to your new transit system, closer to job centers in walkable areas, and so in order to get more people in those kind of concentrated areas of high demand, we're going to have to do things like townhouses and apartments, not necessarily high-rise, but allowing more homes to be built close together in compact structures, closer to some of the high-demand places.
This question came in also. Any thoughts on how we aging boomers, I'm one, will change the housing demands in the not too far distant and even the current environment?
That is a fantastic question with lots of pieces. So there are a number of challenges for older adults. Many of them would like to downsize, but in practice, it's very hard to do that and stay in your community. So people want to stay in their same neighborhood, they have their church, they have their community, they have their neighbors, and we have not built nearly enough age-appropriate housing, accessible housing in the neighborhoods that older adults live in now. And it's often very hard to get through the approval process, right? So an age-restricted apartment building with elevators and accessible units still has to go through the approval process for multifamily housing, and often it just can't make it through. We're not building that. We're also looking at probably a much larger number of older adults who rent their homes. Some of them are people who went through foreclosures during the Great Recession and have never been able to get back to being homeowners. And this is actually going to be quite disturbing because we have a lot of older households who are renting, they're on fixed income. If the rent of their apartment goes up, their income will not. This is one of the contributing factors to seeing rising rates even of homelessness among older adults. And I will say at the scale of the problem, we as a country are not ready for this. We haven't thought about what happens when we have a lot of older adults who are financially pretty strapped. We don't have the social services in place. We don't have nearly enough healthcare aides to deal with their aging health needs. And I'm thankful actually that health and aging is not my primary problem to solve. There are smart people working on this, but this is an enormous problem even separate from the housing issues we're talking about.
This will most likely be our last question for you from our audience here, but this is an interesting one. Utah has some very unique natural barriers to growth. We have the Great Salt Lake. I mean, other communities, of course, have oceans and so on, and lakes, but this narrow corridor that we have, there are some pretty tough areas when it comes to water, deserts, and so on. What this individual said, we have finite resources, and some would say we have some interesting barriers. Is there a point where, especially here in the state of Utah, we're going to have a tough time to keep building? You mentioned building where people want to live. Building where people want to live. Are we, based on your kind of forest for the trees viewpoint, are we in danger of hitting some of those points here in Utah?
There's lots of room to add more homes, but it really requires making the process more flexible, especially around smaller homes. So Utah cannot build single-family detached homes going out indefinitely. You will run out of land very quickly. You will run out of water very quickly. But infill development, surface parking lots, low-rise commercial, these are properties that can be replaced with more units. And denser units, smaller units, use less water, they use less energy, they take up less space, they're more affordable. So the only way Utah is going to be able to build its way out of this is by turning some of the growth inwards and building at higher densities in places that are currently in demand but aren't being used to their fullest potential.
Dr. Schuetz, this has been most interesting. Thank you for joining us here tonight. And let's hear it for the doctor, please. Jason also told me that there are copies of Dr. Schuetz's book out in the lobby, is that, or just outside the door, and free of charge, did I hear? Free of charge. Wow, all right. This has been a great evening. Thank you so very, very much. We want to thank you for being here this evening. We want to thank you for supporting Envision Utah. I'll use this mic. Envision Utah for 25 years. It really is a monumental thing. And just such a great example to us here in the state and even elsewhere of what working together and bringing the players together and talking through our issues and talking through our problems and our dreams, what a difference that can make. And as we've seen over and over tonight, our motto, how we grow matters. It really does. And it's amazing how many people, we have it all over the spectrum. Those who want absolutely no growth, those who take that stand end up usually with growth just overwhelming them and steamrolling them. And then there are those who say, maybe we can steer this, maybe we can make it. As was mentioned earlier, you know, growth is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's what we make of it. By the way, some people who know me well know that I am a numismatist, which is a real fancy name for a coin collector. And we are very pleased tonight to have on all of the tables a very nice collectible coin. On the reverse, you'll find the state symbol of industry, which of course is the beehive, and a reminder that we build this state and our future is working together. And then there's a star all the way around for the 29 counties, pardon me, I know better than that, 29 counties in the state of Utah. And the words that Utahns have used to describe the vision for the future, and that have become really a mission: beautiful, prosperous, healthy, and neighborly. And then, of course, separated by the sago lily, a reminder of the sacrifice of those who came before us in our pioneer heritage and the symbol of our unmatched, though delicate, outdoors. We can't wait to do this again. Utah is a better place to live, thanks to all of the efforts that we have seen come out of this organization, out of this room, out of your businesses, out of your efforts in elected office, out of your participation, your hands-on attitude in your neighborhoods. We can't do this again, without you. We rely on that. And Utah can be as wonderful as Utah is. It can be so much even a better place in another 25 years. Thank you so very, very much. I'd like to thank my colleagues at Envision Utah, who have made the past 5 years that I've been directly involved. And the last 3 years as chairman, I've learned so much from the people on our board, our executive board, those who advise us, and I am very grateful for what this organization has done, and I'm very, very proud to have had just a little tiny small part of it for the last little while. Thank you so very, very much. God bless you all. Have a very, very happy, and a very safe holiday season, and especially tonight as you drive home, please be very careful. Thank you again from everyone at Envision Utah, and here's to another 25 years.